request here today. This is an 80's ramble, but a little bit focused on music from the 80's. So I'll talk about my experiences when I was a kid in the 80's with the music I kind of liked and what I was hearing, either in the car, with my mom, family, or whatever, or just in general. Like I said, I was a kid in the 80's. I was sort of a child of the 80's. Up until 10 years old was the 80's. And then when you're born late in a decade, I was 79, so your growing is like separated differently. It's like, okay, 1 to 10, 10 to 20, But anyway, per decade. I'll talk about other stuff, but from a music standpoint, I didn't start to actually get into music until I was about, I'd say like 4th grade, definitely 5th, by the time I was like 9, 10. A little before that, but really 5th grade was the grade. Like, when I was a kid, I remember hearing this stuff, like certain songs, bands like Toto, and what was the band that did Tarzan Boy? I was listening to it not that long ago. Baltimore or something of that nature. There's stuff like Madonna and stuff like that. You'd hear a ton on like Z100 or whatever. Like Phil Collins and stuff. Even like Billy Joel was all over the place there too, and that was obviously not the pop type stuff or whatever, but the bands I got into originally, it was like, and I guess it's not, and the thing is, some of this stuff was not 80's. I guess it really kind of was, because I want to say Iron Maiden, first album, I want to say I got CDs if this Christmas of 5th grade. It had to been 5th grade, maybe it ended up being 6th, I don't know, but they were CDs, and they were in the long box. You'd get the CD, but it was in like a long box. But the first CDs I got were Number the Beast. So I guess maybe it was after. Dr. Feelgood by Motley Crue was one. When did that come out? Alright, so I'm not. Because Motley Crue might have been 90 actually, so maybe well, that makes sense because 5th grade for me was, it would have been Christmas 89, 90 was 5th grade for me. Appetite for Destruction by Guns N' Roses, I know it was like 87. Number of the Beast was like 82. Okay, so it did come out in 89. Dr. Feelgood came out August 89, so that actually adds up. Dr. Feelgood, I remember Appetite for Destruction, Guns N' Roses, and Number of the Beast by Iron Maiden. But although, I'm trying to, I'm not going to bother trying to figure these out. These were 80 albums in the 80's. Honestly, with Motley Crue, I'm not a big fan of Motley Crue, honestly. Like, I do like some of their tunes, but compared to, like, the stuff that was, if you're comparing it to, like, Poison, I remember having a Poison album called Flesh and Blood. Now, that might have been 92, but Poison was around before that. Unskinny Bob, I think was their song, right? Every Rose Has Its Thorn, that's Poison, right? Like, stuff like Rat and Quiet Riot. I wasn't super into that stuff, honestly. Like I said, and Motley Crue, I'd give an edge over them, but you're not giving Motley Crue any kind of edge over, like, Metallica, Megadeth, Anthrax, Slayer. Early Pantera was more glam stuff, and then by the early 90's, they became the metal band, Even though some of that other older Pantera, even before Phil, they had a different singer, I think, on their first 2 albums. You could see it there, but it was definitely a different Pantera than what they became. But like Motley Crue's not on the level of like Metallica and shit, but I would say they're better than the Poison and Rat or stuff like that. Some of these other, like Warrant, stuff like that. I don't even know a lot of their names. Twisted Sister was another one back then, right? And they were from Long Island. At least Dee Snider was. I think he still lives on Long Island now. I don't know if the rest of the band came from Long Island or wherever they met elsewhere, but Dee Snider definitely was from Long Island. But yeah, Maiden's first album was, I believe, their self-titled first album came out actually in 1980, so they did start in the 80s. They would have formed before the 80s, I would assume, but first studio album came out in 80. And then they pumped out a ton. Killers was 81. Number of the Beast was 82. Peace of Mind was 83. Power Slave was 84. And I think there was a gap. And then 86 was somewhere in time. And Seventh Son was, I think, actually 88 maybe. And then No Prayer for the Dying was 90. So they started every other year. But Maiden's albums in the 80s are fantastic. And obviously Metallica, stuff like Metallica, you get the thrash metal coming out, Megadeth, Metallica, Slayer. You had stuff like, I don't even really know the bands. Possessed, the band that Larry Lalone from Primus started in when he was super young. They were almost like, you saw like I don't know if you'd call it death metal, speed metal type stuff. Like a lot of that shit was coming out in the 80s. Like I said, I wasn't overly into music until the later 80s, but you'd hear the stuff and the more pop type stuff, like I said, Madonna and shit like that, and Toto, and I don't even know if Toto started in the late 70s, I don't know. And the funny thing, like Michael Jackson was obviously doing his thing throughout the 80s, but I think he was in the Jackson 5, I would think, in the 70s, but I don't know if I don't know his solo career work. But Michael Jackson was obviously the man, the musician, the star of that era. Prince had his shit as well, and there's tons of stuff, But it's kind of funny because I wasn't overly into music until like 88, 89, so we're already getting at, you're already getting through a lot of that stuff. It's like a lot of the hair metal shit is now dying off by the early 90s. The people say Nirvana's the one that were the ones that killed that, but I think any kind of grunge stuff and the metal as well, because the metal bands lived on, right? The Metallica, Megadeth, Anthrax. The hair metal bands had albums into the 90s, but they were not what they were in the 80s. They were massive in the 80s. But those metal bands got kind of bigger, or as big as they would get. Metallica's the one that got massive. Megadeth wasn't selling out stadiums. Slayer and Anthrax. Even Pantera. Pantera sells stadiums, I don't know. Bands like the Red Hot Chili Peppers started in the 80s. As well. But yeah, the funny thing is, I remember hearing a lot of stuff, even like Janet Jackson, not Janet Jackson. Well, yeah, it was Janet Jackson. No, Paul Abdul. I remember hearing this shit on the radio. Be on the car, driving to Florida or something, and this is my mom or whoever was in there, my grandma, and that was the kind of shit that was put on. Tom Petty had his run. Well, he had a great run in the 90s too, but the 80s, he was super popular. He was popular the whole time, but he put out a bunch of albums in the 80s, I should say. I'm funny, I can't even think a lot of the pop songs for some reason. I don't know why. Living on a Prayer. No, that was Bon Jovi. And Bon Jovi's another one, actually. I did have that Flesh and Blood Poison album. Flesh and Blood. Sacrifice. Let me look up some more hair metal bands. I should have did a little more research on this, It's kind of funny though to think about, like you have the hair metal bands alongside these thrash or just heavy metal, whatever you want to call it, bands that were out that were clearly better than them. And you know, you can sit here and like what you want. I'm not going to sit here and say you shouldn't like Metallica better than Poison if you like Poison more. I'm saying more from an actual talent standpoint and songwriting standpoint. Those metal bands blew away the hair metal shit. The hair metal bands had some, like, they would make those hits, but they couldn't maintain it, I feel. Skid Row is another one. Oh, Def Leppard. There's Red, there's Twisted and more. I see Kiss was hair metal, but Kiss was started in the 70s. Quiet Rides, they're White Snake, but they say, it says From. You know, Van Halen. Yeah, see, when they say From, they're saying when it formed, because Van Halen's first album was not 1972. It was like 77, 78. Van Halen was fucking huge in the 80s, too. I'm surprised I forgot them. You know, they had 1984, which is a lot of people's favorite album by them. I love that album. It probably is my favorite. But a lot of bands back then, they would pump out albums pretty quickly. It usually wasn't more than like a year in between albums, if not just coming out year after year. You know, then the Van Halen, then David Lee Roth left, and then it was Sammy Hagar, and then they had 5150, and what was that, like OU812 or something? I don't know the meaning behind it. I think 5150 was actually the studio. Eddie Van Halen, the Van Halen studio. And then I want to say for Unlawful Carnal Knowledge came out in 90 or 91, so that was after. But they were putting out their stuff, and then Van Halen became more. They were still a rock and roll band, but it wasn't the rock that it was with with David Lee Roth. Even though Eddie Van Halen, you know, the band is writing the riffs and shit. Eddie Van Halen's writing those riffs. Because then he got into like the keyboards and synthesizers and shit. Even Maiden introduced the synthesizer. Oh, I can't say that fucking word. Introduced the synthesizers. Don't say it fast. I like Somewhere in Time and Seven Son of Seven Son, you do that stuff. Yeah, Van Halen was massive in the 80s because, I mean, they had Van Halen and Van Halen 2 might have both came out in the 70s, and then there was Diver Down. And they had a couple others too out besides 1984. They had like 6 or 7 albums with David Lee Roth. I don't know. But, you know, 1984 has Panama, Hot for Teacher, Jump. There was all the songs are great, but I'm talking about like the radio single hits. Hot for Teacher, Panama, Jump. Was there not one more? I don't know if I'll Wait was one. But then like House of Pain, Girl Gone Bad, Top Jimmy were actually probably better tunes actually than the other ones. Like I said, you have Metallica doing their thing. All of a sudden, it's like Kill 'Em All, Master of Puppets, Ride the Lightning, Justice for All, and Megadeth as well. I'm not a big fan of Killing Is My Business by Megadeth, that first album. But, like, So Far So Good. Peace Sells is the second album. That's a really good album. So Far So Good. So What is a solid album as well. And then Rust in Peace is 90. So after Rust in Peace is when Megadeth really hits its stride, in my opinion. Up until, for me, Cryptic Writings. Risk is what it is. And then World Needs a Hero is really good. And then I kind of lost interest in Megadeth. I know some of the tunes, and there's still some really good stuff there. But then you start cycling through band members like crazy. But, you know, like I said, like his Twisted Sister, like I remember like the songs, like what was it? We're Not Gonna Take It. And was their album, their big album is called Stay Hungry or something. I don't even know a ton of their stuff either, you know. Warrant was Cherry Pie, right? And Def Leppard Def Leppard's actually probably more, I'd say they're even better than like a Motley Crue. Right, what was their big hit, Pour Some Sugar on Me? Was that in the 80s or was that even a 90s tune? They had that really good song in Last Action Hero, so that would have been into the 90s at that point. But like I said, in terms of like the pop, or I'm calling it pop, but I didn't know a lot of that stuff, honestly. I would hear the hits on the radio. Toto's Africa, like I said, Tarzan Boy, and they're playing them well into the 80s, because I think those songs are both earlier 80s. You'd hear like Phil Collins and stuff too, and like I said, Billy Joel was all over the place in the 80s. He was, massive. In the 70s as well, but in the 80s he was fucking huge. Still is huge, but in terms of putting out music and stuff. I guess I'll stop there on the... I guess it's just an 80s music ramble straight up, because I don't know how far I'd be able to go with it. Let me look up a couple more, like, super pop tunes from these, because I will know them all. Like I said, I should have did this before, and I don't know why I did. I'm an idiot. There was a Winger. I forgot about Winger. L.A. Guns. And some of these guys, Scorpions. One of those Scorpions. I feel like some of these people wait, were L.A. Guns not? No. I know some of these people, like, I forget who Kirk Hammett was in. Was he in Quiet Riot? Or one of the other ones? Before he went to Metallica. Just 80s pop songs, and then all of a sudden they'll start to and stuff like what was it, like Don't You Forget About Me? Is that the name of the song? Don't You Forget About Me, from Breakfast Club. That was a classic. Oh, Hungry Like the Wolf. I remember that song. Yeah, like I said, it was the Breakfast Club. Who wrote that song? What was the guy's name? Simple Minds. And there's stuff like, I'm going to see this, Thriller. What was that band's name? Men at Work? Wasn't that one of them? Was that what they were called? Aha was Take On Me. Take On Me. What was that song? There's a cover of it in The Evil Within too. It's actually a good song. Who did that? Like, U2 started, obviously, but did U2 start in the 80s, 70s? I don't know. I'm not a big U2 fan, honestly, at all. I think, I know a lot of people love U2. I think they're fucking overrated. What was that? I want to try. The song was, Ordinary World was the name of this song. I can't remember the name of the band. I'm going to have to look it up. And you have all the Michael Jackson shit, all the Beat It, Billie Jean, all that crap. Thriller. Oh, Billy Idol. There's Billy Idol, yeah. White Wedding. What's the other song? He had a couple of, like, really known songs. There's Karma Chameleon. I remember that song. Karma Chameleon. See, these songs were like I said, I should have did this beforehand. But hey, why not do it during... Toto was 82. Alright. And you got Whitney Houston and stuff in there too. And Sting. Oh, the Police were doing stuff in the 80s. But then Sting went out on his own. The Police were massive. What was it Billy Joel had said? It took brass balls for Sting to leave the Police, even though I think he was literally the primary songwriter. He wrote most of the shit, if not all of it. What was... I gotta see who wrote that. Duran Duran. Alright, yeah. Like Duran Duran. And the rap starts coming around too. You got Run DMC, the Beastie Boys come in. I want to say like Public Enemy and NWA were 80s. They start to get huge, so you have that as well. I was not big into the rap. I do like Run DMC stuff, and I like songs by all those bands, but I wasn't so... And then Vanilla Ice came around. I think Vanilla Ice actually... He was terrible. Like I said, I don't know a ton of those, those bands from them, the rap bands. like I said, there's a lot of stuff like that. I covered a decent amount of genres, but Duran Duran's band, I completely forgot. But yes, that song's good. Ordinary World. The cover's actually really good too. I don't even know who does it. Evil Thing. Let's see. I was trying to look for a film. When did that actually come out? Was I off? That had to have been an 80s song. There's no way that wasn't. Hungry Like the Wolf was Duran Duran as well. They had a lot of hits, actually. Oh, no, it wasn't. Ordinary World was 92. Oh, shit. They are an 80s band, though. And they formed in the 70s, but I feel like they had their most success in the 80s. And who was the guy? Oh, I can't remember. Was it the Dire Straits? They were probably around in the 70s. I would assume they were 70s as well. They had the first video. What the fuck was it? You played the guitar on the MTV. Money for Nothing. Was that what they... And then, like I said, the 80s too with MTV. All of a sudden, all these songs getting videos and shit. And now MTV went into probably mid 2000s, huge on music, and then started to slowly not become that. I don't know if they still play music videos. And VH1 as well. But that's how it was, Like I said, I left so much stuff out. It's more like the stuff for me, it was more like the metal stuff. And like I said, I didn't become a fan of the music. A lot of them, until about 88, 89, I started to actually get into music, and then, all the other bands come, and then I liked a lot of bands that started in the 80s, obviously. But, what was see, there is another one. Was it Quiet Riot? Or is that who I'm thinking of? I gotta look up the band. I don't want to say it might have been Quiet Riot. They were on the Last Action Hero soundtrack with a really good tune. That was a great... AC/DC's all over the 80s too as well, but they were all over the 70s also. Queensryche. That's the band I'm thinking of. That's maybe who... No, it was a Quiet Riot. No, he was not. Maybe it was Quiet Riot that... He was in... When did Queensryche start? 82. They had some good stuff. They opened for... I heard of some of them. I want to say it was Maiden they opened for. When I saw Maiden. Or maybe it was another band. I don't know. But anyway, I ended up turning to mostly 80s, just music ramble. I didn't ramble about anything else from the 80s, so I'll call it the 80s music ramble, even though in the beginning I said I would do more. Because I've rambled about 80s and stuff from growing up in the 80s, and I talked more about the shows and the toys and the movies and stuff in that one, so this was more focused on music. I think I did okay. I definitely missed a lot of stuff, for sure. But, yeah.